going to learn today will most likely completely change what you think about selling and how you do it. I've taught this for a lot of years, as she said, all the way from Wall Street to Main Street. The highest earning client is an individual who makes right at $50 million a year. I teach all the way from people that make 50 grand a year to my highest paying client, my private client who makes $50 million a year. One of my students recently at Verizon said, I've been at Verizon 15 years. We have the best sales training in the world. How come no one's ever taught us what you're teaching us? One of my students at IBM also said, I've been at IBM 30 years. We bring in the best trainers. How come no one has ever taught us what you're teaching us now? Well, most training out there, my students can say they've been to Miller Hyman, Sandler, spin selling, consultative selling, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, Tom Hopkins, and every other sales training program under the sun. Some of you can also probably say that. And they'll say, well, how come no one's ever taught me what you're teaching me? All those other programs are what I call left brain programs. They're all analytical programs. They're all about why people buy. What I teach is how people buy. Because when you know how people buy unconsciously, you can then easily influence why they buy. Now, I could tell you all day long, which would be left brain. You'll understand a little bit more about that as we continue. I could tell you all day long what I do. It's easier. Let me show you. Everyone take your right arm, put it up just like this. Next thumb and forefinger just like this. Everyone have it up? Okay. Follow me, bring it right on down and put it on your chin. Okay, freeze. This is a chin right here. This is a cheek over here, okay? You followed me, and he's thinking, I can't believe I did that. What's even worse is when I present at the same place twice, and the same person does it twice, okay? And that's happened. What happened is you followed me unconsciously. That's like following a person through a red light, not even thinking about it. You followed me with no analytical thoughts. And what we're going to talk about today is a light aspect of what I do. We're going to talk about brain triggers and how to get people to follow you, and they don't even know that they are following you. The purpose of what I teach is to get people to say yes a whole lot faster, get them to say no so you get them off your radar screen, and to shorten your selling cycle. The whole purpose is to ethically move people to yes or to no so you can go on down the road. We're going to cover the 8 brain triggers that you must have in every presentation, and then I'm going to build a lot around this. This is going to be the frame that we're going to cover today. My work actually is in 3 particular areas, and it's all related to peak performance and persuasion and influence. I teach neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a master practitioner in NLP. Who has heard of NLP? Show of hands. Okay. 4 or 5 people. Generally, it's about 10% of the room. Has anyone had any formal training in NLP? You have? Anyone else any formal training? Okay, you have some formal, a couple of you. So I teach NLP. I'm also a master hypnotist, as Mary mentioned earlier. So as a hypnotist, it's our job to get people to do things. And generally stop smoking, lose weight, things you might have heard about. Now, what most people never realize is that when we do hypnosis, we have to, what I call plant, and we have to lay unconscious suggestions to get you to do what you say that you want to do. Now, we're down here in the South. I used to live in New York City. I'm from here. But down here, some people are like, oh, hypnosis, I'm not sure about that, or that's carnival work, or whatever. They do. The thing is this, hypnosis is endorsed. Who knows this? Hypnosis is endorsed by the American Medical, the British Medical, the American Dental, the American Psychological, and the American Psychiatric Associations. Who knew that? Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Columbia, all the major research universities, they all endorse the efficacy of hypnosis. So as a hypnotist, we use a toolbox of techniques to get people to do what they say they want to do. Basically, we're leading them unconsciously. That's what we're going to talk about, is how to lead people unconsciously. So we're going to talk about a little bit of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. We're going to talk about a little bit of hypnosis and language patterns, and I'll give you an example of what that might be in just a moment. And we're going to talk about behavioral research, meaning things that drive people. You had mentioned Cialdini earlier. Cialdini and well beyond Cialdini, things that drive people, brain triggers, and they don't even know that they're being driven to do something. Now, when I say language patterns, what do I mean? A language pattern could be this. And again, I'm going to hop around a lot. You folks are all salespeople, and salespeople are generally very creative, and they can hop around and follow. If I were speaking to a group of engineers who are very procedural, very linear, they would pass out 10 minutes into this presentation because they couldn't keep up with me. So we're going to hop around here a little bit. When I say language patterns, what I mean is this. If I said to you, the fact that you're here means that you want to increase your sales. Mark, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you argue with that?
No.
The fact that you're here means that you want to increase your sales. You couldn't argue with that, right?
We certainly want to increase our sales, yes.
Okay, that's a language pattern. What I did is, you've all heard in sales before, we want to get people to say yes, right? When I nod my head like this is a visual cue to follow me, okay? So we've all heard you want to get people to say yes. In that phrase, in that language pattern, I got you to say yes twice, and you didn't even know it. It was all covert. It was all completely unconscious. When I said the fact that you're here, could you argue? Could you say, I'm not here? What are you talking about? I'm not here. Could you argue?
No.
So I put something down, almost like breadcrumbs, that you stepped right into. The fact that you're here, and then I put my meaning on it. When I said the fact that you're here means that you want to increase your sales. I said one sentence to you that you had to agree with me twice, didn't you? The fact that you're here, you had to agree with. That you want to, it means that you want to increase your sales. I gave meaning to the reason that you're here, and you couldn't argue with it. Notice how I just led you, and you never thought, you know, I wonder if he's using a language pattern on me. He might be a hypnotist putting down a hypnotic language pattern for me. You don't notice it at all, right? Yet I'm already leading you along. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about these, and then I'm going to weave a whole lot into it as we go. If you have any questions, what I'll do is I'll revert this back to you, how it applies to you. I'll talk to you, so say, what do you do for a living? And then we'll talk about how we can actually weave some of these things into your presentation. First things first, how long, for those of you that haven't looked, how long is the average attention span of a person? An average intelligent person?
7 minutes.
7 minutes?
3.
How, 3? Who are you talking to? Where are you talking? The average attention span at best is 20 minutes. I have seen sales presentations go on 30, 40, 50 minutes and more. And what happens, a lot of us, the crowd here looks like I'm 47. How many of you used to watch Charlie Brown as a kid? Any of you? Most of us, right? What did Charlie Brown's teacher always sound like? Anyone remember? Wah, 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 wah. Well, that's what the brain hears. When these presentations are going on 40 minutes and 50 minutes, all the brain hears is wah, 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 wah. See, the right-hand side of the brain, which I'll show you in just a moment, is the side of the brain that makes all decisions. Yet most every one of you have been trained to sell backwards. You've been trained to sell, and this starts at IBM and other major companies. You've been trained to sell to the left-hand side of the brain, which is the side of the brain that does not buy. So we're going to talk about the brain today and brain triggers and things that you're going to want in your sales presentation. Now the first one is attention span. The average attention span is about 20 minutes long. You want to start your presentation with a bang. You want to actually keep them looped and keep them intrigued. I'll tell you how in just a moment. And you want to end with a bang. So when it comes to a presentation, what do you sell for a living? We all sell, right? Yes? Okay, just so I know. What do you sell?
Ladies fitness wear.
Ladies fitness wear, okay. What do you sell? Kate?
Legal services.
Legal service. So legal services also, Michael?
Yep.
Okay. So do you do presentations?
Yeah, every now and then.
Okay, how do you start your presentation? I'm putting them on the hot seat, by the way. So and generally when I put people in these hot seats, they get a little nervous because they're not sure where I'm going to go with it. But you can't get the answer wrong because you probably haven't learned this stuff.
Sure. Usually the presentation starts with, my name's Kay Joe, I'm an attorney based in Ivy. We're a law firm that does business law and business litigation up in North Dallas. Helping small businesses, high net worth individuals, and also doing some collections work for financial institutions.
Okay, hang on there. You know what my brain hears? This is helping you. My brain hears blah, 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 blah. Wah, 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 wah. Now I also know that Cade is predominantly visual. The population breaks down to 65% of the population is predominantly visual, 25% is predominantly auditory, and 10% is predominantly kinesthetic, which means they think through feelings. How do I know, with the exclusion of my NLP people, how do I know that he's predominantly visual? Anyone want to guess?
He's wearing glasses.
No! That's a good one. Humor is always good, by the way. How do I know he's predominantly visual, which means when he thinks predominantly in pictures? Very easy for you to think in pictures, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I know that?
Watching his eyes?
Close, but I didn't really hit his eyes didn't go anywhere. Listening to the pace of his language. Notice when he spoke, he moved at about this pace, and he moved at this pace for two reasons. One, because he was probably nervous that I put him on the hot seat, so he's moving a little bit fast. But secondly, this is probably his natural pace. So my NLP practitioner is talking about brain language. If I know he's predominantly visual, how do I want to sell to him?
Visual.
Visually. I want to engage him visually. Because if I'm predominantly auditory and I start just going into auditory loops, or I'm predominantly kinesthetic and I take forever, for example, if I'm in a sales presentation and I just take forever to get it out, he's looking at it, he's already grinning. He knows he's already checking out on me. He knows what's happening. He's like, I want to reach over and whack you, okay? That's why it's important to know what's going on in people's brains. Again, as I said, what I teach is all about how people buy. When you know how they buy, you can then influence why they buy. Back to your presentation. Open with a bang. I wouldn't open with, this is what we do, blah, 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 blah. I would say, did you know, of all the companies out there, companies who do not use services like ours, and again, I would wordsmith it, do you know that they make 17% less money than people that actually are companies that actually do use what we do? Or companies who do what you do and they don't do X, Y, Z, at the end of every year, they end up losing 30% more money. You want to open your presentation with a shocker. Some contrarian position, something that's going to reach out, so to speak, like taking a 2x4, whacking them right between the eyes and getting them to pay attention. We all have TVs. Anyone ever seen Billy Mays? You know who I'm talking about. He's the pitchman. When he comes on, he goes, "Hi, this is Billy Mays!" Right? Everyone's seen him. You know why he does that? Anyone want to guess?
Get your attention.
That's called pattern interrupt. Yes. To get my attention, because we go through our days on autopilot. I mean, this is the way that we work unconsciously, is that we have to. I mean, there's so much information in our world, we can't process it all. So we go through our days on autopilot. Billy Mays would do that to get your attention. Even if you're walking across the living room, you stop and you hear it. Even if you keep on going, you stop and you hear it, right? He sold over $1 billion of product a year. So in your presentations, the first thing you want to do is get their attention. How do you do that? You do that through something that's going to be shocking, a revelation, a contrarian position, something that's going to be intriguing to make them go, you know, I never thought about that, or that never occurred to me. So that's how you want to start your presentation. Then you want to loop them through. You want to keep their attention, and you want to use what I call hooks. Now, actually, I let it go a little while, and I haven't come back to it. But I said, in just a moment, I'm going to show you that, or in just a moment, I'm going to share that with you. When you lay a hook like that, saying, you know what, Kate, right?
Yeah.
Kate, I'm going to show you 3 things. Now, in just a moment, you know, we're talking about, and I'm making all this stuff, we're talking about how you can save 27% a year. We're going to get to that in just a moment. First, I want to talk about this. What are you already thinking about, though?
The 27%.
27%. Notice how I've laid a hook into him, so I still have his attention. So when I say something like, in just a moment, we're going to talk about, I put a hook in him. So now he's looking for that in just a moment, and I'm keeping his attention. Even while I'm speaking about what I'm speaking about, I still have his attention about that 27%. Then you want to finish with a bang. What is something that will just actually just make them dizzy, thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, could I really lose that much money this year? Are people really losing that much? And we'll talk about why I talk about pain and loss a lot, because pain and loss are what move people. They're one of the biggest emotions. So you want to start with a bang. You want to put hooks in it saying, you know, in just a moment, we're going to talk about whatever it is you know they want to talk about, and then you're going to finish with a bang. Any questions about the first brain trigger? Yes? No? Any questions? Greg? Makes sense, doesn't it?
Makes perfect sense.
Pretty simple stuff. And we know this, some of this intuitively, but most of us forget it, okay? And I recently was at an event, and a guy there said, well, you know, it's all about relationships. Well, that is true, because we buy. Research demonstrates, Cialdini's work, as you talked about, research demonstrates that 90% of the reason we buy is because we are alike, and we like the person we are buying from. However, there are situations that we go into that, guess what? We don't have time to build that relationship. And you better be hitting every brain trigger that you can possibly hit, because you're affecting them unconsciously. I normally wear blue when I speak. I actually don't think I've ever worn purple. The only reason I'm wearing purple today is because I have nothing back from the dry cleaners. So that's the truth. But I always wear blue about Cade's color here, the medium blue. Does anyone know why I wear that color blue with every presentation? Yes, sir.
It's a color that people trust, like a red or something.
Close.
Relaxation.
Relaxation, close. Actually, LA prisons use that color blue and pink to relax prisoners. So we realize that it has a brain effect, yet it's not quite what I'm looking for. Why do I wear blue when I speak? Except today. In research, 80% of people prefer that color blue over every other color out there. Now, when we meet people, we start making decisions about them in the first 1 minute that we are with them, and 70% of that decision comes down to the colors that they are wearing. So if I know 70% of the population likes that color, 80% likes that color, guess what? I'm going to already start predisposing them to like me based upon the colors that I wear. That's the power of color psychology. So I told you we're going to hop around a little bit, all kinds of tidbits all over the place. Okay, next one is imagery. 65% of the population is predominantly visual, which is no surprise to me why YouTube has become successful as it has become over the years. While we're videoing now, by the way, an off note here, if you're not using video in your business, you are flat out missing technology to help you grow your business. You should, and I use the S word, you should be using video to help you grow your business. I mean, how many of you have watched a YouTube video, right? Yes, everyone in the room. How many of you have Googled something and a YouTube video comes up, right? You must be using video. You must be leveraging technology to help you grow your business. The second one is visual. Left-hand side of the brain is analytical and rational. Left-hand side of the brain processes things like time, language, linear thinking. The right-hand side of the brain, which is the seat of the unconscious mind, thinks in imagery. The more images you use, the more you're talking to the right-hand side of the brain. Normally, I never speak without a projector and a big screen. I mean, it's not practical here. That's why I brought handouts. But you always want imagery in your presentations. And even better, you want metaphorical imagery in your presentations. Mark, you look like a smart guy. What do you think metaphorical imagery is?
Imagery that represents something else. It's not what it is, but it represents some concept or some idea.
Yeah, very close. I want it to represent, let's say that, for example, and it's just generic, so I use it. You're coming to me and my company to save money, okay? Or to increase your sales. So the imagery that I'm going to use is all going to be about money and increasing sales. It's not going to be just me telling you, but imagery is going to convey the story that I want you to get. So use as much metaphorical imagery as you possibly can in your presentations. Seems like a no-brainer, yet most of us miss that. Okay, you have to have imagery in your presentation. If you don't, you're speaking to the left-hand side of the brain, which is the side of the brain that does not buy. Everyone get that? Very simple. But the more imagery, the better. I'll show you something here. I posted something on Facebook. Hopefully I remember my code. I put a code in this today. Okay. I posted, the biggest response I've ever had on Facebook was about this product right here. Who has an iPhone? Show of hands. Hold up your hand. Most of the room, 50, 60% of the room, okay? How many of you read that instruction book that you got with your iPhone? It's a big, long instruction book. How many of you read that instruction book? Anyone? No? Did you read yours?
No.
No. How come?
What's
wrong with you?
I knew about it.
So, you had one prior, or?
Yes.
Okay. My point is this. You don't have to think. Right? It's all imagery. It's all icons. You don't have to think. So relative to number 2, let me ask you this, and actually I heard on the radio yesterday, the Wheel of Fortune van is coming to Southport Ranch soon. So if anybody wants to be on the Wheel of Fortune, you might want to go and try out for the Wheel of Fortune. But have you ever wondered why the Wheel of Fortune is more popular than Jeopardy? Cade's contemplating that. Look over here. So his body language will tell you when he starts contemplating, his head will shake back a little bit. So I know he's contemplating. We'll get back to him. Over here, does anyone know why Wheel of Fortune is more popular than Jeopardy?
Vanna White.
Of course. I want you to go to every audience with me. You're a good fan. How come? Besides Vanna White.
The visual effects of the wheel.
Okay. Visual effects of the wheel. No, but great guess, and I certainly appreciate you helping me out. You know what it is?
A lot easier.
It's a lot easier. Yes, thank you, Greg. Exactly, Jeopardy's hard. Folks, this is not a judgmental statement. This is a fact. People do not like to think. The more you, she's laughing, you know, people, you're married to like somebody in your family, your in-laws, something. So people do not like to think. The more you make them think, the less business they are going to do with you. Jeopardy's easy. You just watch a wheel and pick some words. I mean Jeopardy, a Wheel of Fortune. Jeopardy, you gotta think, right? A lot of people don't like to do that. There's a book called Don't Make Me Think, and it's all about web design, and it's about how to pull people through a website with imagery alone. So the more imagery that you can use, if you make people, this applies to your website. If people get on your website, and I can go to 50% of your websites, and I will see this website, and it will have just this big block of text. All these things that you do. Remember this, next time you see that, it's Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. That's all that it is. What I'd rather do is have imagery walk me through your website. Because literally, I don't have to think. My brain doesn't have to work as hard. So Apple got it right. Their icons, it's right brain. People do not have to think. Do you know that Apple is so far ahead of the curve? Do you know that, for example, when they had people holding iPads, they had people hooked up to, what was it? I don't know if they had them in MRI machines, but they had them hooked up basically to brain scanners. And what they watched for is when people held an iPad, they looked for the greatest release of endorphins in the brain. And then, when they saw the greatest endorphins are released in the brain, they constructed and built the iPad to match that feel that people had when they were holding the iPad. Isn't that amazing? That is brain research at its finest. Basically, they're designing their products. I mean, how many of you, if you don't want to say, that's okay, but how many of you are married to your iPads? I mean, how many of you like holding your iPad and enjoy your iPad? Tim? Yeah. Tim's got one right here, yeah. And what's your name? I want to get to know, is that Bob? Okay, I want to get to know Bob. But people love to hold their iPads. Folks, there's brain research behind that. Everything, every sale always starts in the brain. It's so easy to come here this morning and say, oh yeah, good stuff, I learned some new stuff, and then walk out the door, and then go right back into your old patterns. If you're not looking into brain research and the things that I teach, and by the way, I'm one of only 3 people in the country who do it, to the capacity that I do, you are flat out, and I mean this kindly, you are foolish, because this is the way that people buy. So turn as much as you can into imagery. That means all of your collateral material, your website, and your presentation. Makes sense? Any questions about the second one? Third one is this, high contrast. When you buy something, does anyone actually, without researching it, let's say you're going to buy something you've never bought before. It can be a phone. Does anyone just walk in, any of you just walk in and go, oh, I'll take that one? Or do you contrast? You look at them, you compare, you do research, you hold them. Which one feels better, right? So most of us never just walk in and say, oh, I'll take that one. I'm out the door, don't know anything about it, but I'll take that one. The brain has to have contrast to know what to do. Very important. Most businesses miss that. The brain has to have contrast to be able to know which decision to make. Yet when it comes to business, the luxury that I have, now Charlie said we had a bigger group here today, Charles, sorry, said we had a larger group here today. The luxury that I have is the brain likes things that are new. That's why every 2 years, what laundry detergent is new and improved? Tide. It's probably not new and improved. It's the same stuff they keep putting back in the container. But people, the brain likes new things. The brain looks for new things. So if I put you in a coat and tie, and you in a coat and tie, and a couple of others, and Michael over here, and I said, pick one of these guys. They all do the same thing. Pick one to do business with. How would you pick? They all kind of look the same. I mean, they're all wearing coat and tie. The brain looks for differentiation to know how to make a decision. And if you look like everyone else and you sound like everyone else, now we've heard this in business and marketing and branding, but if you look and you sound like everyone else, the brain just picks. And do you know what the brain generally defaults to when it just picks? Anyone want to guess? I know you know.
Whatever's different.
No, when everything looks the same. So the brain's going to default, I've just got to make a decision with these plumbers or these whatever. What does the brain default to? And it's generally not in our favor. What'd you say?
C.
C?
Third one, second one.
What do you know? First one.
Or the guy in the blue shirt.
Could be, yes. Greg is awake this morning, yes. Generally price. If they have nothing else to go on, then they'll default to price. When, you know what, you might have a service that is just heads and shoulders over your competition. So most people have no contrast in their business. Oh, now I remember my thought. The contrast is that I teach unconscious persuasion and influence. To my disfavor, there's only a couple of us in the country that do it. How many of you have Googled literally unconscious persuasion and influence? Show of hands. Not one in the room, which actually is not good for me when it comes to keyword research, because I'm one of a set of only a few people in the country that do it. So many people are interested in learning new things. So when they hear that this is different, they show up. So I'm kind of like tied, the new and improved, and I have that built into my business model. But what do you have built into your model? How are you different? How? And I'm 47, I need glasses. What's your name? Bill. How are you different, Bill? How do you just reach out, just grab me by the collar and say, do business with me? How do you stand out?
I really don't unless you get to know me. Build a relationship.
And no one's going to take the time this day and age. We don't really take the time right away unless we see benefit in doing it right away, taking time to get to know you. I mean, this is a busy world that we live in. We live in a world that is just drowning in information, right? I mean, how many of you can keep up with what you even need to read at work? And the plug, I get nothing off from this. Maybe you've heard of him. He's local. My friend Howard Berg, the world's fastest reader. Anyone heard of him in the room? Anyone seen him? He's here. He lives in Allen. He can read like 30,000 words a minute. You may want to Google him, Howard Berg, world's fastest reader. It's great to actually increase your reading skills because we've got so much stuff coming at us that it's hard to keep up. But unless you stand out and you've got something about your business that is the obvious and clear choice, people are going to actually just graze right over you. So your question, your takeaway there is, how can you differentiate yourself in a very clear and very specific way? Very small example and we'll move on. When you go to the airport, I fly a lot, I speak a lot. And it's not a big deal, but let me give you another example here. Who's heard of Seth Godin? The speaker, right? Okay, you have. He has a book called The Purple Cow. You heard of the book? Anyone heard of the book? Mm-hmm. The book actually has like a Holstein cow, which is a black and white, but it's purple. It gets your attention. It's different. When you go to the airport, I think it's called the parking spot. And their vans aren't just a regular color that say the parking spot. They're yellow with black spots all over them. They get your attention. So when it comes to your business, think about it. And it might not come right away. It'll take some time. But what can you do in your business to say, you know what? Hey, pay attention. I'm different than everyone else out there. Because if you can't do that, guess what? They're going to glaze right over you. Next one is tangible. Got to make it real. So you've got to make things as tangible as you possibly can. To say that, you know, we've got an awesome marketing plan does nothing for the brain. What the brain wants to know is, okay, so what is step one, what is step two, and what is step three? So number 4 is, to the extent that you can concretize your message, the better off you're going to be. I used to speak for a company called the Learning Annex out of New York City, and I used to train other speakers. They have what's called the Speakers Academy. And when they would sign up for the training, generally they would sign up on a Thursday. We would do the training the following, not the next Saturday, but the one after that. So when they would sign up, we'd get them all registered in different parts of the country, and they would say, here's your homework, take this with you. And what we want you to do is start thinking about your topic. We want you to start thinking about your outline. We want you to start thinking about your headline before you come to the training. How come we did that? You want to guess, Tim?
Give them a path. Got to have a roadmap.
Partly, yes. Makes it real. If I just get your credit card number and get you signed up for training 10 days from now, guess what? That's all air. You got a chance to change your mind. If I put this in your hands and say, take this with you, start working through this, guess what? I've now concretized something that was not concretized. So the more that you can concretize your message and make it something that they can get their teeth into, something they can work on, something they can get their hands on, the better off you're going to be. Does it make sense, Mark? Okay? Does it make sense to everyone? So, and that actually eliminates the reason we did that, the reason they did that. I was a speaker, they managed all the business stuff, but the reason they do that was to actually minimize buyer's remorse. Because if people put their credit card up, yeah, I want to be a big speaker and I want to work, with Donald Trump and all these people, and they go home and they're like, what did I do? I gave them all this money, and they call back and they cancel. So when we got them engaged and concretized it, our refunds went to almost zero. Okay? So concretize your message as best you possibly can. I'm going to look at my phone just to check my timing. I don't wear a watch. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. Next is emotional. Now, you've all heard before that you've got to move people's emotions to make them buy, right? Everyone's heard that. Yes? If I were speaking to a group of 1,000 or 10,000 people, I would say, does everyone agree with that? Everyone would say yes. Let me ask you this, though. Does anyone not believe that you have to move someone's emotions to get them to buy? Does anyone not believe that? That you have to move their emotions to get them to buy? You not believe. So everyone believes, right? Everyone, hallelujah, everyone believes in here, okay?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So your paycheck depends upon that, right? Your country club membership depends upon that, right? Your Lexus payment, your house payment, all depends upon moving emotions. Let me ask you this. What moves people's emotions?
Pain or pleasure?
Pain is an emotion. So pain's an emotion. Pleasure is a good feeling. That's an emotion. What moves emotions? I know that you're going to come up with something. Come on, help me out.
Well, I guess when they know you like them or something, or they like you.
That's an emotion.
Right.
But what moves emotions?
How about money?
Interest.
Interest. Okay.
You got money.
Closer. What
Desire.
moves emotion is this. When you really get this, this will start changing also the way that you do business. What moves emotions is, let me back up here. No one, for example, gets into their emotions. No one starts crying and says, why am I crying? Unless they're on meds, right? And then they know why they're crying. But no one just says, why am I crying? What happened is they started thinking about something, which then precipitated the emotion, which was happiness or sadness. So what moves emotions is this. You ready? Imagination is what moves emotions. And when you can move people's imagination, you can easily move their emotions. For example, when you buy things, doesn't matter what it is. Before I had an iPhone, I had an iPod. I'm not one to spend a lot of money on things that I think that I do not need. I have 2 black labs. I take them to the park every day. I walk them, and I was like, should I spend $400 on an iPod? And then I started thinking, which is left brain, and then I started thinking, well, I can actually use it when I'm walking the dogs. And then I started literally imagining myself walking my 2 dogs and having my iPod. Well, guess what? That imagination kicked me into parting with $400. Okay, so it's the imagination that drives the emotions. So the more that you can get them into their imagination, which is a right brain function, the more that you can move their emotions. How do you move the imagination? I'll give you 2 ways today, really simple. First is this. When you say 2 words, it literally shifts them from left brain cortical to right brain cortical. When you say, Mark, just imagine, blank. When I say just imagine blank, he has to shift from analysis to right brain, which is imagination. So whatever I want him to think about, most people will say, think about this. I don't say that. I say, Mark, this is what I want you to do. We're talking about your company saving money. I want you to imagine that, it's already 6 months from now, which is what we call a future pace in neurolinguistics. I want you to imagine that it's 6 months from now, and everything that I told you that I would do, you've already done. And, I want you to just imagine that your company's actually saved 27% over the last 6 months. When I'm saying that, that's different than me saying, Mark, I can save you 27% over the next 6 months. Notice the difference? How you process them? So when you get people into their imagination, sorry I have to move so fast, a lot of material here. When I get people into their imagination, I'm talking to the side of the brain that buys. So one way is just imagine. The second is this. If somebody actually gives me an objection, and I want to overcome the objection, the easiest way, which I teach people how to do, which is not entirely here, is to create doubt. When you start creating doubt, people start doubting themselves, and it's easier to get people to move from their objection. So let's say that Cade gave me an objection, and I would say, and he believes it. Now, we believe our objections because they're belief structures that we've learned somewhere. I'd say, Cade, I completely get, I understand every bit of that. Just suppose for a moment that that's not true. Just suppose for a moment that the people who told you that, and I can show you, that information is wrong. Notice when I say just suppose, it's also like saying just imagine. I'm having him suppose because he has to actually think about what I want him to think about, which is not true, to suppose it. So he's actually doing mentally what I want him to do, which is to start doubting what he heard. Does that make sense to everyone? So if you want to start creating doubt, or you want to actually shift them from left brain to right brain, just say, just imagine, or just suppose. They will follow you left brain to right brain. If you have a presentation today and you want to get a point across, you just simply stop, you take your time, you talk to them, and you're like, Mark, what I want you to do is I want you to just imagine for a moment and then build a scenario for them. Watch them, they will shift, they will start following you. I had a lady one time say, she's like, I tried it in a sales presentation and it worked. And I was like so excited that I lost my place in my sales presentation. So it will work. One more, I've got to move a little faster here, but emotion. You always want to use, you've all been taught in traditional sales training, use pain, right? Probe for the pain. What I want to do, and what I want you to do, is I want you to probe for the pain. And then I want you to take salt, and I want you to pour salt in that pain and rub it in the pain. How come? Not because I'm mean or sadistic or anything. How come?
Creates emotion.
It creates a whole lot of pain, right? The more pain people are in, the quicker they will move. You ever watch commercials, watch Crest commercials. They never say, use Crest and your teeth will be beautiful, sparkling white. They say, you know, if you don't use Crest, you can get gingivitis, you can get cavities. They all start with pain first. Watch Billy Mays commercials. The old ones. He never says, use whatever this product is and you'll have a sparkling clean shower. Every commercial starts with, are you tired of the soap scum? Are you tired of the dirty shower? They're starting with pain first. So use pain, open with pain, well, once you're into your presentation. Turn up the pain, get them to talk about the pain, compound the pain, meaning make them own the pain. What's going to happen, Cade? You said you lost 47% last year. Cade, what's going to happen if you do nothing different? Where are you going to be this time next year? What a lot of people do is they graze right over that and they keep on going. No, I want him to feel bad. I want him to feel really bad because the worse that he feels, the more likely he is to take action. Now, I don't want to go into my clothes because I want to break that state and I don't want him to tie that bad to me, yet I want him to feel bad. Then I'll sit back, I'll break the state, then we'll go to solution. But the worse that I can get him to feel, the better chance that I have that he's going to seriously consider or take action what I have to share with him. Make sense? A couple more here, and then we are all set. Next one is frame. How many of your prospects and clients have a preconceived idea of what you do? Most of you, all of you, seriously, they have a preconceived idea. How many of you, and this is important, I asked this, we have any lawyers in the room? Okay, lawyer, good. So how many of you, okay, so do people have a preconceived idea, they already know what's coming, a preconceived idea about lawyers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and is it always positive? Most of the time, no. Okay, unless you need them, then you love them. The thing is this: if I were actually selling legal services, what I would say if I were Michael, I would say, I'd say, Jim, most people probably think X, Y, Z about lawyers. They think that lawyers are only about billable hours. They think that lawyers are only out for this. They think that lawyers are only out for that. Well, that may be the case with a lot of lawyers, but the more we talk, the more you're going to discover that we are completely different. Notice how I'm matching the frame that I already know that person has. I call it entering the conversation they're already having in their own mind. I'm actually entering the conversation he's having, and I'm called what's pacing that frame. I know that people say lawyers are sharks, whatever, right? So if I know he thinks that, I'm going to just regurgitate that back to him. Notice how he's already nodding his head over there. So if I'm talking to him in a sales presentation, I'm going to say, Michael, you may already think that all lawyers care about is billable hours. If I know he believes that, he's already saying, yes, this guy gets me, this guy gets me, this guy understands me. What I did is I took his frame, I told him what the frame was, and then I said, but you know what? We're different. Here's a new frame and here's a different frame. Does that make sense? So actually, if you know that they've got objections about your business, what you could do is early on say, you might be thinking X, Y, Z about us, or you might be thinking X, Y, Z about our industry. As you're going to discover, is the exact phraseology I teach people, as you're going to discover, because we like to discover things for ourselves opposed to you telling us things, we tend not to believe it when we're told. When we discover it for ourselves, we do believe it. As you're going to discover, we're different. And this is how we're different. Back to concretizing. A, B, C. Notice how I've taken that old frame that he came in with, I busted it, and I put a new frame in place. You got to reframe your interactions. And then the final one is the 30-second anchor. A couple of years ago, actually probably 20 years ago, The Iran-Contra Gate, anyone remember that? They were sending money somewhere and Reagan didn't know and people got indicted and this, that, and the other. And John Poindexter, I think he was, what was he? I don't know what he was. But John Poindexter, he was an admiral and he went on trial and got indicted. And the prosecutor said, you know, ladies and gentlemen, this jury is not about guns. It's not about money. It's not about democracy. This trial is about three things: lies, deception, and deceit. Notice now how he's taking tent stakes and he's putting an anchor into the ground. Now, when he says lies, deception, and deceit, analytically, I already know it's about guns and money and all this, but when he says lies, deception, and deceit, he's putting a brain anchor in the ground. Now, later in his argument, he could say, ladies and gentlemen, he could say, Ali, remember I told you that this was about lies. Well, it's obvious that Admiral Poindexter lied. What I'm doing is I'm just putting tent stakes in the ground when I say lies, deception, and deceit. The brain looks for those things later. So what are the three things you want your prospects and clients to take away from your presentation? You tell them at the beginning, we're going to talk about three things today, Bob. We're going to talk about A, B, and C. Then as you're going through your presentation, you say, hey, Bob, remember I told you we're going to talk about A? Bob's going to say yes, which is also a hook. Here it is. Bob, remember I told you we're going to talk about B? Here it is. Bob, remember I told you we're going to talk about C? Here it is. Notice how I walk them through the presentation completely. Makes sense to everyone? Yes? Pretty simple stuff. And then we move very fast. More than anything, I wanted to give you an overview and I wanted to get you to thinking differently. Any questions before we wrap up? I've got a form that I'd like you to fill out. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us how you could determine that he was a visual person, A, and then B, can you give us tips on sizing people up quickly on whether they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic?
Easy, absolutely. The reason that I know that he's predominantly visual because when he answered my question, he moved, even though he didn't know that he did, he moved at about a voice pace as fast. Predominantly visual people move at the fastest pace because what happens is there are about 2,000 pictures a minute that flow through the mind. The mouth can speak at about 750 words a minute. The mouth is trying to keep up with the mind. So visual people move the fastest. Then you have classic auditories. The classic auditory in our culture is Barack Obama. Notice Barack Obama. Let me back up here also. Visual people, if you see them, they'll go up a lot. They'll do this a lot. They'll look up, left, up, right. I don't want to get into it because there's more to it, but yet when people are constantly going up, they're what's called accessing visually. Next is predominantly auditory. They're people who run auditory loops. Barack Obama is a classic auditory, and if you listen to Barack Obama, you never hear Barack Obama moving really fast like this, and you never see Barack Obama going up. You always hear Barack Obama moving at about this pace, and his eyes go side to side. You'll never see Barack Obama's eyes ever go up. So I know he's a classic auditory. Then you've got your kinesthetics. That's the person that you call. So let's say Michael's a classic kinesthetic. I call him. I say, hey, Michael, you know, we're going to have lunch today. We're friends, blah, blah, blah. Well, what do you want to do for lunch? And this is what I hear. And I'm like, are you there? And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking. Leave me alone. They process kinesthetically, and they're very slow. Doesn't mean they're slow mentally. It means that they process in a different way. So the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is they don't know that the system that the other person is working in. If you've got a high visual like Cade, and you've got a high kinesthetic like I don't know in the room, and they're mismatching each other, what they do is they bust rapport. Rapport is unconscious. Rapport is not commonality. Rapport is not you play golf, I play golf. Rapport is when we have unconsciously, psychologically entrained with each other. For those of you that go to church on Sunday, one person coughs. What happens in church? Everybody coughs. It's because you know what? You are in hypnosis in church, literally. Literally. I mean, this has been research demonstrated. So it's funny, but it's also true. So do you know even revivals, actually, they play music at a certain tempo to put people in a trance? Because when people are in a trance, they're 25% more likely to take the suggestion given to them. So visuals move the fastest, auditories are more moderate, and kinesthetics are slower. We have to wrap up here, but what you want to do is you want to pace back to them. If I'm talking to Michael, I can move fast visually, meaning my head nod, my body language, and everything else. You want to be what they are. You've heard of mirroring, pacing, and leading. When you do that, you will pull people in a matter of a couple of minutes. I've got to respect your time. If you would, please, I'm going to pass out a form.